All right, well, happy Hanukkah to everyone, and we welcome to our discussion of the biblical roots of Hanukkah. If we think about a rabbinic holiday, a holiday that has no Torah roots, no roots in the Bible, really the best example is Hanukkah. Purim doesn't have roots in the Pentateuch, it doesn't have any roots in the Chumash, it doesn't have any roots in the five books of Moses, but at least Purim is in the Tanakh, in the Book of Esther. But of all holidays, the one most rabbinic holiday is Hanukkah. And yet, I want to show that actually there are many biblical roots to the holiday of Hanukkah. We're going to come at it from a number of different angles. Let's take a look. Here we go. So it's ironic. We're going to look at the biblical roots of a rabbinic holiday. Of course, we know that even among Christians, there's a question about, should you put the book of Maccabees in the canon? And we certainly don't. We give very little credence to the book of Maccabees. We don't tell the story of Hanukkah the way the book of Maccabees does. We don't think that Hanukkah is what the book of Maccabees says, although that's the most concurrent source. That's a source from the days of the Maccabees. But Rabbi Soloveitchik said it has the air of the Hellenists. It doesn't have an air of a spiritual book. There's some very strange halachic things there as well. So we pay little attention to it. So it's certainly it's not even a post-biblical book. It's not even an apocryphal book. It's an apocryphal book. It's not a book that we consider part of our canon. So let's see, what are the biblical roots? So the Gemara in Shabbos, Talmud in Shabbos, in many ways lays out the fact that, this very much is a rabbinic holiday, and yet in the process kind of tells us some Torah roots as well. Here's a translation, kind of rough, from the Sphard-Beth. And what blessing does one recite when you light Hanukkah candles? He recites, who has made us holy through his commandments, Asher Yisham Tzivanu, Chanukah, to light the Hanukkah light. The Gemara asks, and where did he command us? What are you talking about? You can't say he commanded us in his commandments. There's no mitzvah. It's not mentioned in the Torah. How can you possibly say it was commanded by God? That God commanded us to light the Hanukkah light? The Gemara answers, Rav Avia said, the obligation to recite this blessing is derived from the verse, you shall not turn aside from the sentence which they shall declare unto you to the right nor to the left. It says in Deuteronomy, whatever the judges, the Kohanim, the priests, the leaders, the elders, whatever they say, don't veer right or left. If the rabbi said light candles, we light candles. From this verse, the mitzvah is incumbent of all of Israel to heed the statements and decrees of the sage. Therefore, one who fulfills the directive fulfills a divine commandment. It's a biblical commandment from Deuteronomy. And Nehemiah says he has a different idea. So the mitzvah to heed the voice of the elders of Israel is derived from the verse, ask your fathers, Shal avicha v'yagecha, and he will tell you. And Zekenecha, and your elders, and they will, v'yomrulach, they will tell you. So when you ask your elders, Shal avicha v'yagecha v'yomrulach, whatever the elders tell you, that's what you should do. So on the one hand, this is the passage that tells us that there's nothing Torah biblical about Hanukkah, because after all, it doesn't say light candles in the Torah. On the other hand, it says that every time we do a rabbinical mitzvah, and perhaps this is the classic rabbinic mitzvah, it's always incumbent upon us from the Torah to do so. This is a famous question. So what's the difference between a Torah law and a rabbinic law? If you have to do rabbinic law because the Torah says you have to follow the rabbis, then every rabbinic law is a Torah law. And I think the Ramban answers, he says, well, the difference is that the rabbi said, with our laws, if you're not sure if you did it or not, it's okay. If you're not sure if your candles lasted a half an hour or 28 minutes, you don't have to worry about it. But when it comes to a Torah law, if you're not sure if you made Kiddush or you didn't make Kiddush, you have to repeat. Let's say, if you're not sure if you benched, you said the grace after meals or not, you have to repeat the grace after meals. So that's the difference. But so our first point is that it's a Torah law because the Torah says to follow the rabbis. But that's sort of a cop-out. It doesn't mean that Hanukkah itself is a Torah law. And also, the whole context here is that it is rabbinic law. The question is, how can you make a blessing on rabbinic law? So let's try a little harder to prove the biblical roots of Hanukkah. So here is a cute sort of thing. I think it's the Baal HaTurim who points this out. Take a look over there. In the Parshat Emor. Emor is Leviticus 23. It's a parsha of the Moadot. Moed, holiday, Moadot, plural for holidays. It's the section that deals with all the holidays. It starts with Shabbat, then it goes to Pesach, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. It's all the holidays. And there's a juxtaposition. After it says you shall live in the booth 7 days of Sukkot, after it tells you that you must live in a sukkah, what's the next section? Command the Israelite people to bring you clear oil of beaten, pure olive oil, beaten for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. It talks about the menorah. After Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, it tells you about the menorah. He said, what's the menorah doing over here? We're not talking about menorahs. This is not about the tabernacle. This is not Parshat Truma Tetzavet. What are we talking about oil for? We're talking about the holidays. And it's a book about sacrifices. What is this doing here? So the answer is, after Sukkot comes Hanukkah. It's part of the juxtaposition in the Torah itself. Should mention in this context, in the book of Maccabees, which we said we don't give much credence to, it mentions that year that they had problems with the Greeks, and they defeated them on this day of Hanukkah, 25th of Kislev tonight. On that very year, they weren't able to observe Tabernacle Sukkot, so they observed Sukkot on Hanukkah. Now, that's a very strange thing to say. That's a good reason. That's one very good reason not to read the book of Maccabees, because that's a strange thing. If you missed Sukkot, you make it up on Hanukkah. That's strange. However, in the Talmud, we do notice that one of the rabbis says, Beis Shammai, the house of Shammai, say that on Hanukkah we should light 8 candles tonight, 7 tomorrow, 6 on the next day, and 1 on the last day. Why? Because the cows on Sukkot, this cow sacrifices of Sukkot, go down 13, 12, 11, 10, down to 7. And you say to yourself, what do the cows of Sukkot have to do with your Hanukkah candle? And the answer could be that there's a vestigial memory among the rabbis, and it's found in the book of Maccabees, that there's a connection between Hanukkah and Sukkot. There's another connection of Hanukkah and Sukkot. You're supposed to bring the first fruits from Shavuos till Sukkot, and if you didn't, you can bring it by Hanukkah. So there's some connection to the biblical Sukkot and Hanukkah. It's the only 8 days that you say Hallel every day is Sukkot, 8 days of Hallel, Hanukkah, 8 days of Hallel. So there's some kind of juxtaposition. Let's get back. But again, this is very cute, but it doesn't say in the Torah you have to keep Hanukkah. There's an illusion that after Sukkot, there's something to do with the menorah. All right, that's cute. Let's continue. Let's continue our quest for the biblical roots of Hanukkah. One of the most really convincing biblical root is the story of Haggai. First saw this for a number of rabbis at my yeshiva in Israel, the Yeshivat Har Etzion, where they noticed that if you look in Haggai, this calendar day that we're on right now is fairly significant. I say fairly because it's close but no cigar. It says, be careful for this day. From this day on, from the 24th day of the 9th month, okay, Tishrei, the month of Rosh Hashanah, is the 7th month. Cheshvan is the 8th month. Kislev is the 9th month. The 24th day, from the 24th day and beyond, when the temple was established. So there's some idea that in the days of Haggai, the early Second Temple period, the temple was supposed to be established on the 24th of Kislev. And from that day and on. So the idea that there's a Hanukkah on the 25th day of Kislev would be based on a Haggai memory. Haggai, again, was as a prophet at the end of the first temple period, beginning of the Second Temple period. And he says that in the days of Zerubbabel, in the days of the early temple, there's something significant about the 24th of this month. So the idea of dedicating it and establishing a temple, the Beis Hamikdash, on the 24th/25th of this month, the 9th month, since Pesach, you count the months from Pesach, it's indeed today is the 9th month. The idea that there's a significance to the day of the 24th going to the 25th, going back to the beginning of the Second Temple, is something that a Maccabee would have known. You would have known the prophecy of Haggai that there's something significant about this date. And if indeed they were able to dedicate the temple on that day, on this day of the 25th, it harks back to Haggai and his prophecy that the temple was established, the second temple was established on 24th of this month. So there's a little bit of a biblical root to this holiday. The Ramban goes a step further. So far, we haven't said that, like, you're supposed to have Hanukkah. You have to have Hanukkah. We could show that the Torah mentions something about a menorah after Sukkot. We could show that there's supposed to be some kind of dedication around this time of year. But who says there's a mitzvah to make a holiday to commemorate the dedication of a temple? The Ramban does. Nachmanides Ramban, Moses ben Nachman, says that the Vadai Chinuch HaMizbeach mitzvah doros. Dedicating an altar, by extension, dedicating a new temple, is a mitzvah for all generations. It's not just once. There was a dedication of the altar and the temple and the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the days of Moses. They had some kind of, and that's a mitzvah. God said, make a dedication for 7 days, 8 days. And then Solomon made a dedication and Ezra made a dedication. But it says in the Torah that you had to have a dedication when they made the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So he says it's not just for them, it's forever. When you're in very important, I think also, anytime you put up a Mishkan or a Beit HaMikdash, you always have to have a dedication. It's true. What we're going to read tomorrow about the princes of the 12 tribes, and they brought 12 days of dedication in the days of the tabernacle. That was what they did that year. But that's exactly how to do it. But the Hanukkah, having a dedication ceremony, chovahi, it is an obligation. That's why in Divrei Yamim, in the book of Kings and Chronicles, Solomon made a Hanukkah. And so too in the book of Ezra, Ezra made a Hanukkah dedication ceremony. It said in Yechezkel they're going to have a special ceremony at the beginning of Nisan, and they're going to dedicate the new temple in the end of days. It's not that Yechezkel is making up this new story. Of course, and when the Mashiach comes, they're going to, of course, it's a mitzvah to make a Hanukkah. You have to make a dedication. And the Gemara even says in Menachos and the Talmud that Moshe, they brought, there's something called Miluim. There's a special type of sacrifice forever that's called dedication, installment sacrifices. And they brought the same ones in the days of Ezra that they did in the days of Moses. And also, he says, I can prove to you it's Emeth. It can be proven to be true from what Hashem says in Vayikra, at the end of the sacrifices. In Vayikra, he says, look, these are the laws of the Olah, the Holocaust offering, the burnt offering, the Mincha, the meal offering, Chatas, sin offering, Asham, the guilt offering, and La Miluim. There's a type of sacrifice forever, not just once, that's called Miluim. What do we call it? The dedication, the filling in the shoes of setting up the tabernacle or the temple. There's a special Yimnei Miluim in Kochei Dorot. There are certain types of sacrifices for all generations. Olam, Mincha, Chatat, Hasham, and Miluim. There are 6 types of sacrifices, and they're all eternal, because Miluim, the dedication sacrifices, are also eternal. Exactly what sacrifice you bring, perhaps, is fungible, but that you have them, that's an eternal fact. So according to Ramban, making a holiday of Hanukkah is an eternal holiday. Now the question is, you see, when I present this, I could fool you into thinking that, well, after all, Hanukkah is a dedication, and there's a mitzvah to make a dedication. So it's a mitzvah to have Hanukkah. Who says that Hanukkah means dedication? Who says that Hanukkah is about dedicating the temple? Maybe it's just about the fact they lit the oil. They found the oil, or they won a war. Well, there are those who say it. There's a Tosfot. There's some other sources that mention that that's what Hanukkah is. And in fact, is there a mitzvah to eat latkes? Right? Somebody asked, what do they have for dinner? Well, the Ramah says there's no mitzvah to have a special meal. we used to have an Asbi dinner, a Hanukkah dinner once during Hanukkah. If it was really a mitzvah, we'd have to have 8 Hanukkah dinners. So is there a mitzvah or isn't there a mitzvah to have a Hanukkah dinner? The answer is, if the chazan gets up and he sings a song about Hanukkah, then it's a mitzvah. But if you don't sing any songs, it's not a mitzvah. What mitzvah is it? So the Ramah, the Moshe Isserles says, the mitzvah is, it's the dedication of the sanctuary. In other words, there may have been a miracle, but that doesn't obligate eating. What obligates eating is the dedication of the sanctuary, and that's what Hanukkah is, part of what Hanukkah is all about. The Ramban says it's a mitzvah in every generation to make a dedication. Now, do we have to commemorate in 2020? Do we have to commemorate their dedication in the year, 165 BCE? Is that important to do that? That's a different question. I haven't proven that it's a mitzvah today to have Hanukkah, but definitely when they made a Hanukkah, it was a Torah law. They had to make Hanukkah. So again, it's not an absolute proof that you really need to make Hanukkah. Let's go back to share that with you. Yes. Okay. So the Ramban says it's a mitzvah to make some kind of a Hanukkah dedication of your altar. The Bahag was a very early rabbi before Rashi, before the Rambam, in around the year 900 or so, Rabbi Shimon Kayar, and he says that saying Hallel, thanking God for the miracles with Hallel, that is a mitzvah. He says it's a Torah law. The Ramban quotes the Bahag. He says maybe it's halacha Moshe Sinai. Maybe it's not. Doesn't say it in the Torah explicitly, but maybe Moses learned this at Mount Sinai, or maybe it's whenever there's a day of joy, you have to say Hallel. If it's the Pesach, Shavuos, or something, you're having joy, you have to thank God for it. So maybe since Hanukkah is a time of joy, maybe it's a Torah mitzvah to say the Hallel. Maybe that's the biblical root, not of the dedication, but of the Hallel that we say on Hanukkah. Some suggest that the lighting the candles is also a type of Hallel. We say when we light the candles, that we're lighting the candles in order to praise God. So maybe the lighting the candles is also a type of Hallel. And the Bahag, a great authority from 1200 years ago, says that when we say Hallel for a miracle, it's a Torah mitzvah. So it's another biblical root of this holiday of Hanukkah. Where does it say in the Torah? Well, in the Tanakh, not in the 5 books, but in the Tanakh, in Isaiah, it does say that when on the day when the temple will be rebuilt and the Mashiach will come, they'll make a song. It'll be like the night of Chag. So we see that when you have a holiday, you have to have a song. It proves that at the Seder we have a song because of the miracle of the Exodus. When the Mashiach comes, we'll have a song as well. Whenever there's a miracle, you have a song. It's based on this verse in Isaiah. Well, Isaiah is not the 5 books of Moses, but it's somewhat biblical, a little bit. You have the idea that Hanukkah is biblical in the sense that it's a payback. It's an old payback, that there's a relationship between what we read in the Bible about dedication and the dedication of the tabernacle and Hanukkah. This medrash is well known. It's found in the Yalkut Shimoni HaMelachim. Chanukah said, the 25th of Kislev, that's tonight, the work of the tabernacle was completed. What? Tabernacle? I thought the tabernacle was completed in Nisan. No, but it was left folded up. They didn't use it until Nisan, many months later. As it is written on the first day of the month, you shall put up the Mishkan, the tent of the meeting. Israel murmuring against Moses, saying, why wasn't it erected immediately? Maybe some flaw happened to it. So the Kadosh Baruch Hu said he intended to mingle the joy of the tabernacle with the month in which Yitzchak is born. And when he was born, they made cakes. And they said to him, anyway, some sort of thing about Isaac. At the appointed time, I will return to you at the next time of year because of this month of Kislev. Anyway, for some reason, it had to be at Nisan. But in any event, now because of this, the month of Kislev, in which the work of the tabernacle was completed, lost out. So the month of Kislev was upset. How come there's no tabernacle dedication in Kislev? So the Holy One, blessed be He, said, it is incumbent upon me to make restitution. I have to make up for this. We've got to get a tabernacle dedication in this month of Kislev. What restitution did the Holy One make? The rededication of the temple by the Chashmonaim. And so too, the Holy One will compensate Mar Cheshvan in the future. So maybe one day Cheshvan will have a dedication because Cheshvan doesn't have any holidays. And also the month of Kislev was given Hanukkah because it lost out on having the first Hanukkah, the first dedication of the tabernacle, moved to a different month. But that's when they really finished. So this time of year is propitious from the point of view of Haggai was talking about building the second temple during this time. And God was talking about, Moses was talking, the Jews were talking about rededicating the tabernacle at this time. So it's an appropriate biblical time to rededicate the second temple again in the days of the Maccabees after they had been defiled by the Greeks. Another perhaps biblical association is association with Adam. Again, a little bit of a stretch, but that's what we're doing tonight. We're stretching a little bit to try to find biblical roots for a rabbinic holiday. That it goes back to Adam. What does Hanukkah have to do with Adam? So the Gemara in Avodah Zarah talks about idolatry. They explain idolatrous holidays. And in fact, if you ask some Christians, why is there Christmas at this time of year? Say, well, there was Dionysus. There was some kind of pagan holiday around this time of year. And some Christians, not all Christians, some Christians don't like the Christmas date, but they said the Christians sort of appropriated that pagan holiday to be associated with the birth of, But as Jews, we did something else. According to the book of Maccabees, in other years, Jews were forced to celebrate this pagan holiday on this day. So the year when we finally got rid of the Greeks from our temple, we were able to not have the pagan holiday on this time, and Hanukkah supplanted the would-be holiday of the winter solstice. With regard to the dates of these festivals, the sages taught when Adam the first man, saw the day was progressively diminishing. The days are getting short. The sun sets at 4:50 or something. And before 5 o'clock, it's dark outside. So he said, why? Because the autumnal equinox till the winter solstice. He did not yet know that this was normal. So he said, woe unto me, perhaps because I sinned, the world is becoming dark around me, and I will return to the primordial chaos. And this is the death that would sends upon me from heaven. As it says, you shall return to dust. So he spent 8 days fasting and in prayer. So Adam was the first one to celebrate Hanukkah. When the winter solstice came, this time of year, and we say it's the 21st, but you can imagine the 25th, just as good. From the 25th to the 1st, around now, he fasted and he prayed, and therefore Hanukkah commemorates this. But it became a pagan holiday. Once he saw that the season of Tevet, the winter solstice, had arrived, and so the days became longer, he said clearly the days became shorter and longer, and that's just the way the world works. He went and observed the festival for 8 days. He celebrated for 8 days. The next year, he observed these 8 days in which he had fasted the previous year, and it became a celebration, festivities. And then Adam established it for the sake of heaven, for God's sake. But the Gentiles of later generations, the pagans, established it for the sake of idol worship. So what are we saying? That Adam, who was the first to make Hanukkah at the time of Hanukkah? Adam. By the way, it's pointed out, I forgot I saw someone recently pointed out, there are echoes of this in the Hanukkah discussion. Because what do we say on Hanukkah? We mentioned before, Poches v'holech, that Shammai says we go down. And Beis Hillel says we go up. Mosi v'holech, tonight's 1 candle, tomorrow 2 candles, the next night 3 candles. What does that have to do with this? This passage also says that the days were getting Poches v'holech, they were getting shorter. And then later, there were Mosi v'holech, the days got longer. So this idea that the candles go up or go down has to do with the original holiday of this time of year, the Adam holiday of the winter coming and the days getting longer. It's a celebration of that. And it's also a prayer that things not get too dark. So Hanukkah in some ways has a biblical roots if you accept this midrash, this agadah, this story that Adam established this holiday, then Hanukkah has biblical roots. The story of Adam who established this holiday. But we're not done. We have other ideas. I thank my son Tani for this one. It's a Kiddush Hashem. It says in Leviticus, and I shall be sanctified among the children of Israel. Every time we say Kaddish, Baruch Hu, benching, we sanctify God's name. And that's a Kiddush Hashem. It sanctifies God's name. Sometimes you have to sanctify God's name by dying for the sake of Judaism. That's also a Kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of God's name. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. And when you put out the candles and you say God made a miracle for the Jewish people, God rests among the Jewish people, it's a Kiddush Hashem. It's pursuing Nisa. The idea of spreading the word of the miracle could be seen as an idea of sanctifying, of a Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, making God's name holy. And this could be interpreted as a biblical root, a biblical fulfillment. When I put my candles on the windowsill, I fulfill the mitzvah to sanctify God's name. Everybody will know, wow, God did miracles in those days and in our days. And now, based on all this, you can perhaps understand the statement at the end of the Rambam. When the Rambam finishes the laws of Hanukkah, he says, the mitzvah of Hanukkah, the mitzvah chaviva himad mod, it's a very, very beloved mitzvah. And you say to yourself, huh? Every mitzvah is beloved. What's so beloved about Hanukkah? We heard a class yesterday, I had the privilege to hear a class from my mechutin, from Rabbi Rosenzweig. He talks about it. He says, all the different values that Hanukkah adheres. The value of what are the values of Hanukkah? The value of that we restored Jewish dignity. The Greeks had beaten us down. They'd stolen our wives and stolen our daughters. They had taken our money, right? It's a restoration of Jewish dignity. It's a restoration of the Jewish monarchy, that the Jews were sovereign in the land of Israel. It's a lot of things. And all these values, it's pursuing Isa to spread the miracle. It's Hallel, it's Hodah, it's Simcha, it's rejoicing with God, rejoicing with the dedication. It's Hodah, it's thanksgiving, it's Hallel, it's praise of God. For all these values, it's a mitzvah chaviva himod. It's a very beloved mitzvah. But maybe the Rambam is also saying that what? The Rambam is saying that, you think this is like the lowest of all mitzvahs. Of all the mitzvahs, this is the most insignificant mitzvah. Don't tell me about Christmas, Hanukkah. It's got nothing to do with that. That may be their big holiday. This is the lowest holiday on the totem pole. No. Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. That's a big deal. It's a Torah commandment, right? Purim is at least mentioned in the Bible. But Hanukkah, the rabbis, a couple of pages in the Talmud, they're not even sure themselves if they want it to be a holiday. But the Rambam says, no, it's a mitzvah chaviva yamod. It's a very beloved mitzvah. He says, if you don't have if you don't have enough money, sell your shirt and go get candles. Sell your shirt. When do we ever hear such a thing? Rabbi Rosenzweig says there's no source in the Talmud for this idea. Rambam made it up, that there's an idea that it's so beloved that if you don't have one, sell your shirt and get a Hanukkah candle. Why is it so beloved? One might suggest it's beloved because of everything we said. It has biblical roots. It is not just, don't think it's just a rabbinic mitzvah. It's a Kiddush Hashem. It's a holiday going back to Adam. It's a payback for the lost dedication during this time of the year. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to thank God for miracles. It's a mitzvah to make a dedication ceremony. It's a time that was set aside in Chagai to be a rededication of the temple time. It's alluded to even there in Leviticus 23 to 24, Sukkot, followed by the menorah discussion. And finally, it's always a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis and listen to the sages and the elders and not veer from their words right or left. So why is it such a beloved mitzvah? Maybe it's because it has all these biblical roots, which the reader might not realize. You might think, Hanukkah is not important. It's the last holiday, forget about it. He comes and says, no, it's a very beloved holiday. Don't treat it lightly. It has, and this is my suggestion, it has biblical roots. So it may be rabbinic, but its roots are in the Torah. So with that, we have made the argument that Hanukkah has biblical roots. Any comments or questions about this idea? I'll take this time. We'll take comments or questions.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know why, but to me, it's always been a happy time. I don't think it's because of the toys. Maybe the toys, but it just seems like I'm happy around this time. The candles make me happy.
Okay.
I'm a little boy. I don't know.
Interesting. The Gemara says it's a day of Yomim Tovim v'Halvodah. It's a time of Yontiv with Hallel, with Thanksgiving and praise. It doesn't say Simcha, but it says Yontiv. Yontiv is usually a time for Simcha. In fact, Hallel is usually only recited if there is Simcha. And the Rambam says Simcha. The Rambam, one of the few who says the days of Simcha, days of joy. So the idea that you find it joyful makes sense. Also, the mystics say, when you look at the candles, it sort of reminds you of the base of Mikdash of the Holy Temple. It kind of brings you back to a holier and more special kind of place. So that could be something too. So yes, and that's the Rambam was saying. It's a mitzvah chaviva yimot. When a Jew lights candles, it's like, wow, this is great. We're lighting candles. And you say, what's the big deal? I mean, a couple of candles. Really, it's one of the smallest mitzvahs. It doesn't cost much. Not a lot of fanfare about it. And yet, for Jews, it's a mitzvah chaviva yamor. It's a very beloved kind of thing. People get a kick out of it. We enjoy it. It brings us joy. So it's interesting that you said
we can play dreidel for money. Yeah, we can bet. If I had money, I could play.
In general, you don't bet, but there is a custom to play dreidel.
Okay. For
anybody else?
For bupkis.
Anyone else? Additional comments or questions?
Rabbi, Happy Hanukkah. So, from my understanding, so there is a focus of whether Hanukkah should be a holy day or not. So, could you expound on what that focus is? Like, who takes issue with observing Hanukkah? Yeah,
I mean, there's no explicit source that says, one rabbi says, do keep Hanukkah, one rabbi says you don't keep Hanukkah. What you do find is that it's underemphasized. Whereas in the Talmud, it's sort of hiding in a discussion about Shabbos candles. And it's in a Mishnah here in Bava Kama and over here and over there. It mentions that in Bikurim. It's mentioned here and there in the Talmud, but it doesn't seem to be taken seriously. In the Mishnah, there's very little treatment of Hanukkah. That's the only evidence of Hanukkah being sort of a non-entity. But that view lost out. It's interesting. Hanukkah may have had various evolutions. It may have started as a temple holiday, then it was transferred to a home holiday. It may have started as a Jerusalem holiday. We mentioned maybe they only lit candles in the holy sanctuary, like in Jerusalem, Temple Mount, something like that. So it may have had different permutations, but maybe it had one meaning before the temple was destroyed, when candles were not important, just Hallel was important. Maybe after the temple was destroyed, they moved it to the home where you could light candles there. So very interesting discussions, but the biggest hesitation, the theory as to why maybe the Mishnah de-emphasizes Hanukkah is that the Maccabees were followed by the Chashmonaim, and some of those Chashmonaim were really horrible individuals who murdered the rabbis, such as Yanai and others. So Herod himself, no good Nick. So there's some possibility. But it's more of a historical theory. In the Talmudic literature itself, there's no hesitation about Hanukkah. And in fact, the Rambam, puts that impromptu that he's saying, no, it's a very important holiday, and you should sell a shirt on your back to keep Hanukkah. Yes.
This seems like one of the only times we put the candles in the window and say, look at us, we're Jews. Look, but mostly we wear dark clothes. I mean, good Jews, and we don't show off.
Right. It could be. It's one of the only holiday that relates to the Gentiles. In other words, there's a debate whether you're putting out the candles for Jews, for fellow Jews, or you're putting out for your Gentiles. Let's say, Charlie's my neighbor, but he doesn't live across the street. The only people who see my candles from across the street are Gentiles. So do I get any credit for that?
Yes.
I'm trying to tell. So there, in the Talmud, it seems you do. Talmudai, it seems that you do, but it's a debatable point. But yes, Hanukkah seems to have a broader reach because it relates to the Beis Hamikdash, and the Beis Hamikdash, especially in its third iteration in the ultimate times, is not a small project. It's a project for the whole world. So that's a very, very important point. Moshe Tarragon has a wonderful lecture about it, where he talks about the idea that we had an influence on the Greek Empire. The Greeks, some of the Greeks were not trying to persecute us; they were trying to learn from us, and we may have kind of the next permutation after Greece, Rome was really Christianity, which is a whole lot better than the paganism that came before Greece, that was Greece. So Jews may have played that role in transitioning the world from pure paganism to the Greek mythology to ultimately Christianity, which is a whole lot closer to Judaism than paganism. Even though we have serious splits.
And the funny part is that Christmas, the only day that Christians, a billion Christians appreciate a Jew.
Yes, it's an old joke. Yes.
And
any other
side note is I'm in horrific pain. If you guys can keep me in your prayers, I'd appreciate it.
Everyone should daven for Shira. She should have a
sorry to
feel better. Absolutely.
You should be well.
Anyone else? Any other comments or questions? Do you buy into this idea that the Hanukkah has some biblical roots? It's not a foreign substance that was imposed on it afterwards, but it has some roots deeper into our history and the biblical ideas. Any other comments?
It must be very important because all the rabbis say, be sure and light your candles as close to 5:30 as. That's important. I mean, they all say that.
Very good. The Rambam, I didn't mention that when the Rambam says a very beloved mitzvah, he also says we have a Zohar Bamot. You should be very careful. Where did he get that? We should be careful with all the mitzvahs. Why all of a sudden you shouldn't be careful with Yom Kippur or Sukkot? Well, how could he say you should be careful with? So they say, well, it says in the Talmud, in connection with Hanukkah, maybe Shabbos, Hazoyer b'neir having been budding Talmid Chacham. If you're careful with the candles, you'll have children who are scholars. Is it referring to Hanukkah candles, Shabbos candles? Maybe that's why women pray at the Shabbos candles. But there's an idea that somehow through the candles, you should be careful. Have a zoy. Those who are zahirin, they're careful with candles. So Rambam claims you should be extra careful with it. Again, not to take it lightly. Again, sometimes it's a special effort because it's somewhat of a rabbinic holiday to be extra careful with it, not to treat it lightly. Any other comments?
Rabbi.
Yes.
So, do you know if Karaite Jews observe Hanukkah?
I know that the Ethiopian Jews do not. I don't think.
Okay.
I think they did. But Karaite, interesting question.
Well, see, I'm only asking because today or say at some point between now and the establishment of Hanukkah, if a group of Jews decided to say, you know what, we don't believe this is a proper holy day and we're not going to observe it. In the eyes of Rabbinic Judaism, would that be heretical, or could such a community still participate in the rabbinical tradition?
What's the question? Would it be heretical?
Yeah, would it be heretical for a community to outright say we are not observing Hanukkah? Would that be outright heretical?
Yes, because of the first passage we quoted. There's a mitzvah. You're not allowed to stray from the rabbinic words, right or left. Okay. So it's a rabbinic law. It's an absolute rabbinic law. Straying from rabbinic law is very serious.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. No, there isn't really wiggle room to get away from Hanukkah.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Rabbi, Charlie's question kind of led into what you and I, or what I asked you on the internet earlier. Can you tell me why the 5:30
yes. Okay.
time?
So there are two opinions. One opinion is should light the candles when it's completely dark, because what's the use of a candle when it's light outside? So that's what we do. 5:30. As if it was the end of Shabbos or something like that. We wait for the stars to come out. Talmud actually uses the word shkia sachama, the setting of the sun, which usually is what it sounds like, setting of the sun, which is like 4:50. It's much earlier. The advantage of that is that at least there are more people out in the street. When it's completely dark outside, how many people are going to be on the street? Let's say in the olden days when we didn't have lights, we didn't have street lights, so the natural light was so important. So when do you think people would be out in the street? They would only be out in the street until it was pitch black. Once it's pitch black, it's too late already. So that's probably the original intent of the law. That's probably the best reading of it, if you ask me, historically speaking, that you should light it at sundown, which is when people start walking home. They can't work anymore. They realize it's when the sun goes down. It's like a call. You better get inside before the hoodlums come out, right? So then you walk home, and hopefully within the next 40 minutes you get home. By the time the stars come out, it's too late for anything. But again, so one view is you want to light earlier so more people can be around. Second view is that you want to light later so that you can see the candles better. My son Tani mentioned that Moshe Feinstein thought that you could just wait a minimal amount, like 13 minutes after sundown. Some would say that that's when the stars come out anyway. So that way you're sort of closer to the setting of the sun, but you're also, at least you could argue that the stars have come out at some level. So different opinions, but the predominant Ashkenazic view is to light with the when the stars come out, which again, you could take there are different times you could use. Some people use 72 minutes. Often when you deal with rabbinic law, you say that the stars come out only a half an hour after sundown. So, about 20 after would be fine.
Oh, I did it wrong. I thought that it was at,
Sorry?
I thought it was at 4:30. I read the,
Tomorrow night is 4:30.
oh, I read it wrong.
Obviously for Shabbos, we have to light before. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Right, but it's a good leniency as far as Shabbos goes. Let's say you try to light your candles and then the candles go out after 45 minutes. So it could be it's not that bad because the first 15 minutes, those are the 15 minutes before Shabbos started, before sundown. The next half hour was the first half hour after sundown. So maybe for Friday night, it's good enough. But if you want to be really strict, the candles have to be so long that you light them tomorrow night, 18 minutes before sundown, 20 minutes before sundown. Plus, it has to wait 42 minutes till the stars come out, and plus another half an hour after that, which is a total of what did we say? It's much longer. So, according to that, you'd have to have a very long candle or oil to make it last. All right, everybody. I hope that clarifies a little bit. Yeah, if you lean towards Sephardic, maybe you could argue that you should light earlier. But a good compromise is to light around five, a few minutes after 5. That way, it's both there are people out in the street and it's still arguably sundown as well. That would be good.
Tomorrow night at Mr. Brown's house at 4:40.
Yeah, I moved it up a little bit so I have a few minutes to light the candles.
Okay. All right. It's good to see you back in town. You look great.
I thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Good night, everyone.
Can I feel better, Shira? Okay.
Night. Happy Hanukkah.
Jacob has something. Hold on,
Okay,
Jacob
good.
has something.
Sorry?
No, I was just curious because of since nowadays people are out way after the sun goes down. Nowadays, you light the candles at I don't know, up to 9 o'clock when people are still out. Is such an argument feasible?
Okay, so that's another interesting question. Can you light the candles? Can you light the candles really late at night? I have a problem next week. I'm on call. I'm gonna light the candles very late. Luckily, my children are gonna be awake, so I'm gonna light for the children. So that works. Now according to the original Talmudic law, and according to one view, once the time passes, once the rush hour is over, you can't light anymore. But there's another view that no, you just have to it has to last as long as the rush hour lasts. It has to be a half an hour. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning. It has to last a half an hour. If you want to be strict according to all the opinions, you should light at the beginning. Of course, in general, we try to light at the early time. However,
Dang it, please tell me the correct time.
Friday night, 4:30, before 4:30, and every other night, we do 5:30. We're trying not to be any later than that. If you want to be a little earlier, 5:15. Okay, so if you get home at 3 o'clock in the morning and from work, whatever, and everyone's sleeping and there's no one in the street, can you light candles? So generally we say you should light without a bracha because, but the question is as follows. There's no question that originally was instituted so that people would see. Nowadays, we don't necessarily put it on the windowsill on the next to the door as they used to. So we can, and there were a lot of dangers that came up over the century. So we canceled the idea that it has to be so public. If we cancel the idea it has to be that public, how far do we cancel it? Do we cancel it so much so that if you even just lit it by yourself at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's okay? Or no, we canceled it. It doesn't have to be in public, so a million people have to walk by for the rush hour, but there's still an idea that has to be for somebody. So if there's nobody, then it doesn't work. However, some argue that you're also a somebody. If you light it for yourself, it's also something. So it's like a Kiddush Hashem for yourself. So so that's an arguable point that maybe you could, but the bottom line, if you come home, if you're lighting by yourself, now, let's say you happen to live by yourself and there's nobody on your street, it's a very quiet street, and you don't live with anybody. You can still make a bracha at 4:30, whatever, 5:30. Why? Because that's the mitzvah, and you happen not to have a lot of friends or whatever. That's your problem. You know, that's not, the law is you lit it at the right time, the right place, the windowsill, people to see. The fact that nobody walked by, you know, I think it's very arguable. That's not a problem. You can still make a bracha, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not lighting when they told you to light, and you're not simulating what they had. You know, if you can get 10 people together at 3 o'clock in the morning, then you're simulating rush hour. But you haven't even simulated. You've simulated nothing. So that's why it's arguable. Maybe you shouldn't make a bracha at 3 o'clock.
Well, but in New York City, obviously there are people walking by at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, so Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, I believe it was, he said, look, even though he never went to a movie in his life, but if you live near a movie theater, you have to keep the candles going from sundown until the late show is over.
Interesting.
Because until the late show is over, the rush hour is not over. In those days, the rush hour was over when the people called Talmud Doyim finished collecting the wood as the sun was setting and stars are coming out. And today, the city never sleeps. So in New York, maybe you could argue there's always rush hour. There's always somebody walking by. You have to know your neighborhood. They're probably different neighborhoods. But I used to go on the subway at 11 o'clock at night. There were plenty of people. It was busy. So it is subjective. Could be argued that it's subjective about the rush hour at that time. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, everybody. Have a great night. Happy Hanukkah and have a great Shabbos. Hope we'll see you over Shabbos and everything.
Happy
Happy
Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. Love y'all.
Feel good. Take care.
Good night, all.
I'm not good.
Night. Thanks for joining us, Mark.